The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was the largest building ever made by any species in known space. Its ceiling rose so high that clouds sometimes formed inside it. Representatives from 300 worlds sat in their assigned seats, arranged in a massive circle around the speaker's platform. Today, that platform held a single figure who looked very small and very old. Krathful stood there with his 4 legs planted firmly on the cold metal floor. His body was covered in a hard shell, like a crab from Earth's oceans, though he had never seen such a creature. His shell was gray now, faded with age, and covered with deep scars that told the story of 200 battles across 40 different star systems. He had served the dominion of Thessar for longer than most species in this room had been traveling between stars. But today, his hands were shaking. "Honored representatives," he began, his voice coming through the translation devices that every being wore. "I come before you to deliver a warning. 3 cycles ago, my reconnaissance fleet made contact with a new species. They call themselves humans. They come from a small blue planet orbiting an ordinary yellow star at the edge of Sector 7G. A soft murmur went through the crowd. Some representatives were already looking at their data devices, pulling up information about this unremarkable world. The data was not impressive. 1 planet, barely capable of space travel, no faster-than-light technology, a population that spent most of its time fighting itself. "I can see you are not concerned," Krathful continued. "This is exactly why I am here." He touched a control, and a holographic display appeared above him. It showed a small mining colony on an asteroid, simple metal buildings surrounded by drilling equipment. Human buildings. "We discovered this colony by accident. Our orders were to assess and, if necessary, subjugate any species we found. I had done this many times before. I expected it to be simple." The display changed to show his fleet, 12 warships surrounding the tiny colony. The size difference was almost comical. One of his ships could have destroyed the entire asteroid with a single shot. "We broadcast the standard surrender demand. We told them they were now subjects of the Dominion. We told them resistance would mean death." Krathful paused. "They refused." A few chuckles came from the audience. The idea of such a primitive species refusing surrender was amusing to them. "I gave the order to disable their communications and destroy their 2 small mining ships. We did this in less than 30 seconds. Then, I sent in ground troops to take control of the colony and capture the inhabitants for study." The old warrior's voice grew quieter. "I sent in 40 soldiers, 8 came back." The chuckling stopped. The humans had no weapons, not real ones. They had mining tools, cutting lasers meant for rock, explosive charges designed for breaking asteroids. They had metal pipes and sharpened pieces of scrap. Against my soldiers, who wore full combat armor and carried military-grade weapons. Krathful's claws clicked together, a sign of deep distress in his species. "They did not fight like soldiers, they fought like something else, something I had never seen in all my years of war. When we shot them, they kept coming. When we wounded them so badly they could not walk, they crawled. One of them, a female, held a door closed with her own body while her companions escaped through a back passage. We killed her, of course, but she smiled while she died. She smiled because she had given her people 30 more seconds." He looked around the great hall, meeting eyes of many colors and shapes. "They used their knowledge of the colony against us. They turned off lights and attacked in darkness. They opened airlocks when my soldiers walked past. They rigged their own equipment to explode. One of them was a medical worker with no combat training at all. He killed 3 of my soldiers using only surgical tools and then died trying to kill a 4th. The display showed images now, recorded by the cameras in his soldiers' helmets. The council watched in uncomfortable silence as humans with terrible wounds continued to fight, as humans used their own bodies as shields for others, as humans died cursing their enemies with their last breath. "I eventually destroyed the colony from orbit," Krathful admitted. I lost 40% of my ground forces trying to take a mining station with no military value and no real weapons, against a species we had never met before, who had no reason to fight so hard for a pile of rocks in empty space. He turned off the display. I spent the return journey studying everything we know about humans, their biology, their history, their psychology. He paused. They evolved as persistence hunters. Do you understand what this means? On their world, they killed prey not by being faster or stronger, but by following it until it died of exhaustion. They would chase an animal for days, never stopping, never giving up, until the creature's heart simply stopped. Krathvel stepped closer to the edge of the platform. Their entire civilization is built on this principle. They do not stop. They do not give up. They have a concept they call spite. It means doing something painful to yourself specifically because it will also hurt your enemy. They will burn their own house down if they believe their enemy will burn with them. Now his voice rose, carrying across the great hall. You look at their technology and see primitives. You look at their single planet and see weakness. But I have fought species across this galaxy for 2 centuries, and I have never, not once, been afraid of an enemy. Until now. The Vexari elder planted all 4 feet firmly. If we attack them, we will not conquer them. We will only teach them that we are their enemy, and they will never, ever forget. They will never stop. They will chase us across the stars like their ancestors chased prey across their plains, and they will not rest until one of us is extinct. The hall was silent. Then the High Representative of the Thessari Dominion rose from his seat. He was tall and elegant, his skin a deep purple, his voice smooth and confident. Commander Krathvel, we thank you for your service and your concern. But the Council has reviewed the data from Sector 7G. The humans are confined to one system. They have no advanced technology. They pose no threat to the Dominion. He smiled, showing teeth that were very white and very sharp. Your recommendation will be filed and considered. This session is concluded. Krathvel stood on the platform for a long moment, watching the representatives file out, already talking about other matters, already forgetting his words. You will remember, he whispered to the empty hall. When they come for you, you will remember that I warned you. But no one was listening. 15 cycles passed. The Dominion grew larger, swallowing 3 more star systems into its territory. The name Krathvel faded from memory, just another old soldier with old fears. And in the planning rooms of Thessar Prime, a new campaign was being prepared. High Admiral Vexthara stood before a 3-dimensional map of Sector 7G. She was young for her rank, ambitious and brilliant, with scales that shimmered blue and gold in the light. She had never lost a battle. She did not intend to start now. 3,000 warships, she announced to her gathered officers, more than enough to secure the entire sector. Our primary target is the 3rd planet from the local star. The natives call it Earth. She touched the map and the small blue world grew larger. Data scrolled beside it. Population, technology level, military capacity, all of it pointed to an easy victory. Intelligence reports indicate no unified planetary government. The humans spend most of their resources fighting each other. They have primitive orbital stations, a few colonies on nearby planets and moons, and no faster-than-light capability. We estimate complete subjugation within 6 rotations. One of her officers, an older male with a scarred face, shifted uncomfortably. Admiral, there was a report some years ago. A commander named Krathvel. He encountered humans and... I have read the report, Vexthara interrupted. A mining colony defended itself with unusual determination. This is not unusual among primitive species facing first contact. They fear the unknown. Once they see the true power of the Dominion, they will submit. She dismissed her officers and began the final preparations. The fleet arrived in Earth's solar system on what humans called a Tuesday. They emerged from jump space beyond the orbit of the largest planet, a gas giant the natives had named Jupiter, and began their approach in perfect formation. 3,000 ships, each one carrying enough weapons to level a city. Earth's orbital defense stations detected them immediately. Alarms rang across the planet. Humans looked up at their sky and knew that everything was about to change. The first wave of Dominion ships reached Earth's orbital stations in less than a day. The stations were not military bases. They were research facilities, communications relays, small factories that took advantage of zero gravity. They had no heavy weapons, no shields, no chance. But they had people. Commander Sarah Chen commanded Orbital Station 7, a communications hub with a crew of 43. When the Dominion ships surrounded her station, she did not try to surrender. She did not try to run. Instead, she opened every channel her station possessed and began transmitting. All Earth stations, this is Station 7. I am uploading everything we can see. Ship positions, weapon signatures, shield frequencies, communication patterns. Everything we can record before they kill us. Her crew worked frantically, scanning the enemy ships with every sensor they had. Data flowed down to Earth in a constant stream. Details that would take military scientists years to discover on their own were being handed to them for free. The Dominion ships demanded surrender. Sarah Chen smiled at the screen showing the alien commander. "You want this station? Come and take it." They did. Station 7 died in fire. But by then, 42 other stations had received its data and were adding their own observations. When those stations fell, the information had already reached Earth. 100 million computers were processing it. 1 billion minds were beginning to understand their enemy. Admiral Vexthara did not notice. The stations were irrelevant to her plans. She ordered the ground invasion to begin. The landing ships descended through Earth's atmosphere like metal rain. They came down on every continent. In every major city, hundreds of thousands of soldiers in powered armor with weapons that could burn through concrete like paper. The first reports were exactly what Vexthara expected. Resistance was scattered and ineffective. Humans fled before the might of the Dominion. Then the reports began to change. In a city called Moscow, the humans had stopped fleeing. They emerged from buildings with weapons that should not have been able to pierce Dominion armor, but somehow they did. Intelligence later discovered that human weapons scientists had studied the data from the destroyed orbital stations and found a frequency that disrupted the energy shields. They had manufactured new ammunition in factories that were supposed to make cars and distributed it through a network of ordinary citizens. In a country called Vietnam, Dominion soldiers entered dense forests expecting easy sweeping operations. Weeks later, less than half of them came out. The humans knew every tree, every stream, every shadow. They attacked from nowhere and vanished into nothing. They used traps and poisons and their own bodies as weapons. But the strangest reports came from everywhere at once. Before the invasion, humans had been killing each other. There were wars being fought on 3 continents. Ancient hatreds divided nations that had existed for thousands of years. The Dominion had counted on this. Divided enemies were easy enemies. Within 12 hours of the first landing, every human war stopped. Soldiers who had been shooting at each other in the morning were sharing ammunition by evening. Governments that had refused to speak for decades were coordinating defensive strategies. A species that could not agree on anything suddenly agreed on one thing: the aliens had to go. Vexthara did not understand it. Her intelligence officers did not understand it. They searched human history for precedents and found only confusion. How could a species so divided become so united so quickly? They did not understand that humans were a tribal species. They fought each other constantly, but they also recognized a simple truth. Some enemies were outside the tribe, and when an outside enemy appeared, all the fighting inside the tribe stopped. This was written into their genes, carved into their history, embedded in their very souls. The Dominion was not fighting a planet of divided nations. It was fighting a planet of 7 billion people who had suddenly realized they were all on the same side. The first request for reinforcements arrived at Thessar Prime 30 days into the invasion. Admiral Vexthara's report contained a phrase that would become infamous throughout the galaxy. The humans refused to understand they have lost. More ships were sent, more soldiers landed on Earth, and still the humans fought. They fought with weapons and without. They fought in daylight and in darkness. Children memorized troop movements and passed them along in songs. Elderly people sheltered fighters in their homes. Medical workers healed the wounded and then picked up guns themselves. Every building was a fortress. Every street was a trap. Every human, regardless of age or training, was an enemy. Vexthara looked at the casualty reports and felt something she had never felt before. It took her a long time to recognize it as fear. She had come to conquer a primitive world. Instead, she had awakened something far more dangerous than any technology. She had awakened humanity. 2 cycles had passed since the Dominion ships first appeared in Earth's sky. The cities that humans had built over thousands of years were now fields of broken stone and twisted metal. Great towers lay fallen like dead trees. Rivers ran through streets where millions had once walked. By any reasonable measurement, the war was over. The Dominion controlled every major population center on the planet. But the war was not over. The war had just begun. On the 3rd moon of Thessar Prime, in a military facility that officially did not exist, Krathful sat before a wall of screens. Each screen showed a different part of Earth, a different battle, a different report of something impossible. His shell had grown even more gray in the years since his warning to the Council. His movements were slow and painful, but his mind was still sharp, and what he saw on those screens did not surprise him at all. "You asked me to come," he said to the officers gathered behind him. "So I came. What do you want to know?" A young commander stepped forward. Her name was Thessara, and she had lost her entire battalion in a place called Afghanistan. The experience had left scars on her that were not visible on her scales. "We control their cities. We have destroyed their governments. Their military leadership is dead or hiding. But every time we declare a zone pacified, it erupts again within days. We do not understand how they continue to fight." Krathful made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Show me a pacified zone," he said. Thessara touched a control. One of the screens changed to show a city that had once been called Chicago. Dominion flags flew from every tall building that remained standing. Soldiers patrolled the streets in armored vehicles. Checkpoints controlled every intersection. "We have held this city for 60 days, Thessara said. "The population has been disarmed. All known resistance fighters have been executed. We should have complete control." "Watch," Krathful said. For a few minutes, nothing happened. Then a Dominion supply convoy entered the screen, 6 vehicles carrying food and ammunition to a forward base. They followed a route that had been used safely 100 times before. The first vehicle exploded. The blast came from beneath the street, where humans had somehow planted explosives without being detected. The other vehicle stopped, and soldiers poured out, taking defensive positions. They scanned the ruined buildings around them with their weapons raised. Nothing moved. There was no enemy to shoot. The soldiers relaxed slightly. Then the shooting started. It came from everywhere and nowhere, from windows and doorways and holes in the rubble. The soldiers returned fire, destroying entire buildings. When they finally stopped shooting, 11 of them were dead. The attackers had vanished. "They did not wear uniforms," Thessara said. "They did not carry identification. They looked exactly like the civilians we allow to walk these streets. When the shooting stopped, they put down their weapons and simply walked away. We cannot tell them apart from the population." "That is because there is no difference," Krathful said. Every human is a potential fighter. Every human is the resistance. You are not fighting an army. You are fighting an entire species. He stood slowly, his old joints protesting the movement. You want to understand humans, then understand this. They have a concept called guerrilla warfare. It means the weak fighting the strong by refusing to fight directly. They have used it for thousands of years. Always against enemies who were more powerful, more numerous, more advanced. And they have won more often than they have lost. He walked along the wall of screens, pointing at different images. Here, this country was called Vietnam, a tiny nation that defeated two of the most powerful empires on their planet. Here, Afghanistan. They call it the graveyard of empires because every invader who entered those mountains was eventually driven out. And here, a small island called Britain held alone against an enemy that had conquered an entire continent. Krathvold turned to face the officers. Humans do not measure victory the way we do. We count territory and resources. They count something else. They count whether they are still fighting. As long as one human resists, they have not lost. This is not strategy. This is faith. And you cannot defeat faith with weapons. Another officer spoke up. Then what do? We cannot simply leave. The Dominion's authority depends on being seen as invincible. Then you have a problem, Krathvold said. Because the moment you invaded Earth, you proved you were not invincible. Every species in the Dominion knows about this war. They are watching, they are waiting, and they are beginning to wonder. He returned to his seat. The humans know this too. They are not just fighting for their planet. They are fighting to show the entire galaxy that the Dominion can be resisted. Every day this war continues, every soldier you lose, every report of another impossible human victory, it spreads through the Empire like a disease. You have not just awakened humanity. You have awakened hope in every conquered species under your rule. The officers exchanged looks of concern. What Krathvold said was true. There had been unrest on a dozen worlds, protests that had to be crushed, whispers of rebellion that spread faster than they could be silenced. What about negotiation? Thessara asked. We could offer them peace. Let them keep their planet in exchange for submission to Dominion authority. Krathvold's mandibles clicked in grim amusement. Try it, he said. They did try it. A peace delegation was organized. A meeting place was selected. Representatives from both sides would discuss terms. The human representative arrived alone. She was small, even by human standards, with gray hair and a face lined by age. She walked with a limp, and one of her arms hung useless at her side. The Dominion officers who received her felt almost embarrassed. This was what the enemy had sent. The woman's name was Elena Vasquez. She had been a school teacher before the invasion. She had lost her husband in the first bombardment, her children in the resistance, and her arm in an explosion that had killed the governor of the occupation zone she lived in. The Dominion representatives offered generous terms. The humans could keep their planet. They would have limited self-governance. They would only need to pay tribute and provide workers for Dominion projects. It was far more than any conquered species had ever received. Elena Vasquez listened politely. When they finished, she smiled. You do not understand, she said. We are not interested in terms. We are not interested in peace. Not while a single one of your soldiers stands on our soil. She stood up from the table. The guards raised their weapons, but she made no threatening move. She simply pulled open her shirt to reveal what was strapped to her chest. My people have a message for you, she said. We do not forgive, we do not forget, and we do not surrender. The explosion destroyed the entire building. The war continued. 5 cycles after the invasion began, the war had become something the Dominion had never experienced before. It was no longer a military operation. It was a bleeding wound that would not heal, draining resources and soldiers and morale with every passing day. The numbers told a terrible story. More Dominion soldiers had died on Earth than in the last 3 major wars combined. The cost of the occupation exceeded the entire military budget of most Dominion members, and still the humans fought. But the real damage was happening far from Earth. On Thessar Prime itself, veterans of the Earth campaign walked the streets with empty eyes. They flinched at loud noises. They woke screaming from dreams they would not describe. When asked about their service, they said nothing, but their silence said everything. Families began to hide their children when conscription officers came. Protests erupted outside military facilities. On 12 different colonies, citizens refused to pay the war taxes that funded the occupation. The response was harsh, but harshness only created more resistance. The humans had done something no one thought possible. They had made the Dominion afraid of its own people. Admiral Vexthara had been executed after 3 cycles of failure, replaced by Admiral Korath, who was himself replaced by Admiral Sen. Each one promised victory. Each one delivered only more death. The council was running out of admirals. But the true turning point came not from human courage or Dominion weakness. It came from human intelligence. Deep beneath the surface of Mars, in tunnels that had been dug in secret over years of desperate work, a team of scientists worked on captured Dominion technology. They had been studying everything they could get their hands on, every piece of equipment taken from dead soldiers, every crashed shuttle recovered from battlefields, every fragment of alien science they could steal or salvage. Their leader was a woman named Dr. Yuki Tanaka. Before the invasion, she had studied theoretical physics at a university in Japan. Now she studied the impossible, trying to understand technology that should have been centuries beyond human comprehension. The breakthrough came on an ordinary morning, when a young technician accidentally connected 2 components that should not have been able to work together. The resulting energy surge nearly killed everyone in the lab. But when the smoke cleared and the screaming stopped, Dr. Tanaka looked at her instruments and began to laugh. She laughed because she understood. Dominion technology was based on principles that humans had already discovered but never fully developed. Their faster-than-light travel used quantum effects that human scientists had theorized about for decades. Their weapons were extensions of physics that humans already knew. The gap was not as wide as anyone had believed. And humans, it turned out, had a gift that the Dominion did not. They could improvise. 6 months later, the first human starship lifted off from the hidden Mars base. It was ugly. It was held together with salvage and prayer. Its engines were jury-rigged combinations of human and Dominion technology that should not have functioned at all. But it flew. And more importantly, it could enter jump space. The Dominion had a network of jump gates, massive structures that created stable pathways between star systems. One of these gates orbited in the outer reaches of Earth's solar system, protected by a defensive fleet. The human ship did not attack the fleet. It simply flew past them, faster than they could react, and entered the gate before they could close it. Commander James Okonkwo stood on the bridge of that ship, looking at a view that no human had ever seen before. Stars that were not his own, space that was not his sky. He was the first human to leave his home system, and he had done it by stealing the road. "Begin transmission," he said. The message went out on every frequency the Dominion used. It was sent in every language their translation systems contained, and it said something simple. "People of the Dominion, we are humans. 5 years ago, your empire invaded our world. They killed our families. They burned our cities. They tried to make us slaves, but we did not surrender. We will never surrender." Images accompanied the words, videos of the invasion, the bombardment of civilian populations, the execution of prisoners, the destruction of cultural sites that had stood for thousands of years. The Dominion's crimes documented in terrible detail. "We did not start this war. We only wanted to explore the stars in peace, But you taught us that peace is something that must be earned. You taught us that the galaxy is a dangerous place and that only the strong survive. You taught us well. The transmission ended with coordinates, a location in Dominion space where humans would be waiting. We are coming, not to conquer, not to enslave, only to answer for what was done to us. Any species that stands aside will not be harmed. Any species that helps us will be remembered as friends. But the Dominion itself will learn what humanity has learned. Commander Okonkwo's face filled the screen, scarred and tired, but burning with a fire that would not die. You will learn that there are some enemies you should never make. The effect was immediate. On 14 different worlds, populations that had been conquered by the Dominion for generations suddenly remembered what resistance meant. They had been told for so long that the Dominion was invincible, that fighting was pointless, that submission was the only choice. Now they had seen proof that none of this was true. If humanity could resist, so could they. Riots broke out on Thessar Prime itself. Colonial governors reported complete breakdown of order on worlds that had been peaceful for centuries. The Dominion fleet was suddenly needed in a dozen places at once, stretched thin across an empire that was beginning to crack. And through the jump gates, more human ships were coming, each one uglier than the last, each one held together by willpower and spite, each one crewed by humans who had nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. The tide had turned. The great hall of the Galactic Council had changed since Krathful last stood within it. Half the seats were empty. Half of those that remained were occupied by holographic projections, because travel between systems was no longer safe. The clouds that had once formed naturally beneath the high ceiling were gone, replaced by the flicker of emergency lighting. The Dominion was dying. It had taken 7 cycles. 7 cycles of human stubbornness, human anger, human spite. 7 cycles of a species that should have been conquered in days, instead dragging the greatest empire in the galaxy into a war it could not win. Krathful walked slowly to the speaker's platform. He needed mechanical supports, now metal frames that held his ancient body upright when his own strength failed. But his eyes were still clear, and his voice still carried when he spoke. "I told you," he said. The words hung in the air. No one responded, no one could. "I stood in this very place before this very council, and I told you what humans were. I told you they would not surrender. I told you they would follow you to the end of the universe if that was what it took to answer your invasion. You did not listen." He activated the display, and images filled the air above him. Human ships, hundreds of them now, approaching Thessar Prime. They flew in formations that no military academy would recognize, ugly shapes that should not have been able to function, held together by salvage and something that could only be called faith. But they were not alone. Behind the human ships came others, ships from worlds that had been conquered by the Dominion for generations, ships from species that had forgotten what freedom meant until they watched humanity refuse to give up theirs. The fleet that approached Thessar Prime was not just human. It was every grudge the Dominion had ever earned, every wrong it had never answered for. "You could have had them as friends," Krathful said. "This is what I tried to tell you. Humans are a social species. They form bonds easily. They forgive quickly when they believe forgiveness is deserved. If you had approached them peacefully, offered them trade and partnership, they would have welcomed you. They would have shared their strange creativity, their impossible determination, their endless capacity for hope." His voice grew harder. "Instead, you showed them the worst of what the galaxy could be. You killed their children. You burned their history. You tried to break their spirit. And you learned something that every human already knows." He turned to face the council directly. "Humans do not break. They bend, they suffer, they bleed, but they do not break. And when the storm passes, they stand back up and they remember everything that was done to them, not to surrender, not to despair, but to answer." The High Representative of the Thessari Dominion rose from his seat. He was not the same one who had dismissed Crathville's warning all those years ago. That one had been executed when the first colonies fell. This one was younger, more frightened, desperate for any way out of the disaster his predecessors had created. "What can we do?" he demanded. "There must be something, negotiations, tribute, whatever they want, we will give them anything." Crathville's mandibles clicked. "You still do not understand. This is not about what they want. This is about what you made them into. You took a species that was curious and hopeful and showed them that the universe was cruel. You taught them that kindness was weakness, that mercy was suicide. You forged them in the fire of your invasion, and now you are afraid of the weapon you created." He pointed at the display, at the approaching fleet. "Those ships are not coming to negotiate. They are coming to finish what you started, not out of cruelty, not out of greed, out of something far more dangerous, out of the absolute certainty that if they do not end you now, you will try again. You will wait until they grow weak, until they forget, and then you will return to take everything they love." The old warrior stepped down from the platform. "Humans have a saying, if you strike at a king, you must kill him. You struck at them and did not kill them. This is the result." He walked toward the exit, past representatives who watched him with expressions of horror and despair. At the door, he stopped and turned back one final time. "They will not destroy you all. That is not who they are. But they will make certain you never threaten anyone again. And when it is done, when the Dominion is broken and scattered, they will do something that will terrify you more than any weapon." He paused. "They will forgive the species you conquered. They will offer alliance instead of subjugation. They will build something new in the ashes of what you created, something based on the principles you tried to crush out of them. And in 1,000 years, no one will remember your empire except as a lesson in what not to do." Crathville walked out of the great hall. Behind him, the council descended into chaos. Accusations flew between representatives. Some demanded immediate surrender. Others called for a final stand. None of them noticed when the first human ships entered orbit around Thessar Prime. On the bridge of the lead ship, Admiral Sarah Chen looked down at the world below. She had been a young officer when the war began, commanding a small research station that had been one of the first to fall. She had lost her crew, her family, her entire life to the Dominion's invasion. Now she was here, at the heart of the empire that had taken everything from her. Her communications officer looked up from his station. "Admiral, we are receiving transmissions from the surface. They want to negotiate surrender." Chen was silent for a long moment. "My grandmother told me stories when I was a child," she finally said. "Stories about our history, about all the times humanity faced extinction and survived, about all the empires that rose and fell while we endured. She told me that our greatest strength was not our weapons or our technology. It was our ability to keep going when everything seemed hopeless." She turned to face her bridge crew. Humans stood beside members of a dozen other species, all of them united in purpose, all of them looking to her. "We did not want this war. We did not ask for this war, but we will finish it, not with cruelty, not with revenge, but with the certainty that we have earned our place among the stars and no one will ever take it from us again." She straightened her uniform. "Accept their surrender. Begin humanitarian operations for the civilian population, and send a message to Earth." Her voice carried the weight of 7 years of suffering and survival. "Tell them we're coming home." Below, on Thessar Prime, Crathville stood at a window and watched the human ships descend. They came not as conquerors but as something else, something the Dominion had never understood. They came as survivors. And in the galaxy they would build, every species would remember the lesson that humanity had taught them. Some enemies should never be made, and some spirits can never be broken. The old warrior closed his eyes and, for the first time in 7 cycles, felt something like peace. The war was over. Humanity had won.